Hey folks, Nathan P. Butler here. Welcome back to Nate's Favorite Deck Building Games, and this is our third video on the Power Rangers deck building game. This is the first one looking at an actual expansion. Technically, Zeo Stronger Than Before could be considered kind of an expansion to the base game, but it really is its own core set because it is a standalone expansion. All the other expansions we're going to see require one or the other of the core games to play, but they can be integrated with either one. This one might be a little bit unusual for those who are not reading the comics from Boom Studios. This is the Omega Forever expansion, and we'll be looking at it plus the bonus pack 1 that was a bonus with this one. Just as the two core sets had those bonus boxes, all these small expansions have bonus packs. There's a significant difference, though, between the content of a bonus box versus a bonus pack, as we will see. So, Omega Forever lays it out here, and I'll explain what the heck they're talking about in a moment. Omega Now, Omega Forever. When the Morphin Grid was shattered, its energy empowered individuals across the galaxy. In this expansion to the Power Rangers deck building game, you can play as one of the powerful Omega Rangers, or the Dangerous Anointed, featuring new gameplay elements, including Omega Zords, fusion modes, and honestly, can't tell if there's supposed to be an apostrophe that's missing, or if there's supposed to be a comma that's missing, and Dane's vast arsenal of weapons. Omega Forever will add loads of variety to the game. And then the pack is just bonus pack, and it tells you which expansion the bonus pack is for. We'll look at this actually as we look at the characters for Omega Forever. But speaking of characters for Omega Forever, who are these so-called Omega Rangers, and where the heck did they come from? So, Boom Studios has this fantastic comic line that builds upon the Power Rangers universe. It starts out with stuff that takes place during the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers era, gets into this crazy sort of multiversal type of storyline called Shattered Grid, and in doing so brings in a lot of other characters. But what it does is it adds layers to the story. For example, bits about things happening with Jason's family. How Kimberly, for example, was the last to move into Angel Grove prior to the start of the original series, and how it was that her boyfriend at the time, Matt Cook, who we will see in one of these expansions, is actually who introduced her to the rest of the gang from the original 5. But one of the key story points of early Power Rangers was dictated by contract disputes. They were a non-union production, and the Ranger actors were paid really, really poorly. As a result, when the time came for some contract negotiations leading into the first movie, the goal was, apparently, at least according to a couple of the actors who've spoken since then, to stand together and push for better pay. It turned out that the group kind of split over the issue, and instead the only ones who stood together looking for better pay were the actors for the Red, Yellow, and Black Rangers, Jason, Trini, and Zach. So what did they do? Instead of giving them more pay, they chose to recast the Rangers for Red, Yellow, and Black, and outwent the original 3 Rangers. In fact, their last appearances on the show aren't even actually them most of the time. It's people as stand-ins inside the suits. It's in some cases similarly sounding voice actors, and in other cases archival footage. So they could give them a send-off and have these characters supposedly go off to a peace conference from which they would not return. Though we'd see more of Jason and so forth later, we'd see more of Zach later, we'd find out the fate of Trini later, but that's a whole other story. Well, in the comics, that is effectively a cover. They were going out into the world after the events of Shattered Grid to deal with these anointed, becoming the Omega Rangers. So the Red, Yellow, and Black Omega Rangers are the original Red, Yellow, and Black Power Rangers, Jason, Trini, and Zach. But if you haven't read the comics, this expansion makes no sense whatsoever. Again, they're leaning very heavily on the Boom Comics lore as they're building this deck building game. Along with, it seems, some of the artwork. Otherwise, it is very similar artwork. So let's see what those original 3 are up to. So the first thing you're going to need is you're going to need to open up the rulebook and see how to actually integrate this. This is a small expansion that integrates into one of the other base games. It is not a standalone like Zeo was. So here we have the 4 new heroes that come in the set. And what I'm showing you here are 2 different sets of cards. The bonus packs for the small expansions, with the exception of a little bit of extra stuff in the very last one, are basically just foil card versions of the hero cards from that set. There's no new gameplay content whatsoever, they're just foil cards. So here I've got the foil cards showing the teenager side, and the regular cards showing the Ranger side. So we have Jason Lee Scott as the Omega Red Ranger, Zach Taylor as the Omega Black Ranger, Trini Kwan as the Omega Yellow Ranger, and a new character from the comics, Kia, or Kaya, I don't know if I've ever heard that said out loud, as the Omega Blue Ranger, one of their allies that they meet out in the universe. You might notice some symbols on their abilities. They have to do with these so-called Omega Coin tokens. There are 4 of those, 1 for each color. We'll look at those in a moment. First, let's look at the villains. These are 4 new villains. We have Dane, Calbatus, Garrison Vox, and Anointed Kia. Again, they have a scheming side and an empowered side, and in the case of Kia, the name actually changes to Anointed Omega Blue Ranger. The standard stuff is still here. For a villain, when all 4 slots are filled, you'll draw a card and flip the card, and they have some kind of ability here that is typically an ongoing or a triggered type of thing. You flip it over to the empowered side. It is again -2 energy to activate attached cards, and typically an ability that has an energy cost here. In the case of Dane and Covetous, there's actually some special stuff going on here. They're kind of unique. For Covetous, you start on the scheming side. If you're dealt 5+ total damage in a single turn, you immediately flip the card. While it's on this side, at the start of your turn, you gain 2 energy, but you lose 1 health, and your attacks deal -1 damage. Once you flip, because you've dealt a certain amount of damage, not because of attachments, you get the empowered version, and at the start of your turn, 2 energy and lose 1 HP, but your attacks deal +1 damage, so you're still getting energy, but you're getting hurt by it, and you're still modifying your damage, in this case in a positive way. But then, if you deal 5+ total damage in a single turn, you immediately flip the card. So it's like he's building up the energy, spending it as he's taking it in over and over and over again. Then, as always, every character has a signature item, but in the case of Dane, it doesn't cost 6, it costs 0, and it plays very differently with some other special cards. So here's Dane's character card. When all 4 slots are filled, draw 1 card and flip this card. That's standard, but look at his ability. At the start of the game, shuffle Dane's plasma energy batons into your deck. That's this one with the 0 cost, hence 0 cost because it's a starter card, essentially, for him. Though it can be detached or otherwise removed, and it winds up going back into a group with these other cards I'm about to show you here. So you can gain it, just like you would any other signature item if it comes off, but it is a cost of 0, so basically a free thing to grab and reattach, and it matches any color, and you attach it when it's gained. As always, the resources only happen if you're playing it from your hand regularly, but it says attachment. Attachment is a special new thing that is introduced in this set, but not used very often. Basically, usually when you attach a card to one of the 4 sides of your character card, it'll have an energy payment ability on it. So to activate that ability, you pay the energy, you exhaust the card, and so on. Well, in this case, attachment means that when it's attached to your character, that's when this takes place. And typically it is some kind of ongoing or triggered ability. Hence, no need for an energy cost, which might get confusing. Because typically if there's no energy cost, it triggers when it's played from your hand. In this case, attachment means it has an ability while it is attached. But it only attaches to your character. It doesn't attach to other cards. So in this case, at the start of your turn, gain 2 energy. When detached or destroyed, return to Dane's stack, as I just mentioned. When Dane becomes empowered, spend 2 energy. Swap Dane's attached signature item for another from his stack. It comes into play ready. Use this ability any number of times during your turn. Usually an ability can only be used once per turn unless that card somehow leaves play and re-enters play and it, quote-unquote, forgets what happened before. So the plasma energy batons just give him energy, but when he's empowered, he can spend 2 to swap it out. And there are 4 other options. The plasma longsword with an attack, the plasma torch that lets him search his deck for a card of his choice and so on, a plasma whip, which is another type of attack, and a plasma shield that is a block card. Notice there's no cost. He can't buy them. He can only swap them in and out with that empowered ability. That makes Dane rather different, just like Cavitus. This expansion also introduces new starter cards. 2 hero cards, 2 villain cards, right? 1 per player. And they are not actually exactly the same. They're very similar, but not exactly the same across the sides this time. So in both cases, the resources you could get by just playing it from your hand would be 2 shards, 1 energy. You shuffle it into your starting deck. It is an 11th card for your starting deck. You don't remove anything. And the ability is, when this card is played from your hand, lose 1 HP. That is a case for both. So they're getting resources, but it's hurting them in the process. Or for the Omega Morpher, there's also an extra line. Gain your Omega coin. That's these that I showed a moment ago. Red, yellow, black, and blue. On the teenager side of your heroes, you'll have an ability as usual. In the case of Kia or Kaya, it's just when you heal, draw 1 card. The others tie into that Omega Morpher. When you play Omega Morpher, destroy a card you control, or heal 1 instead of losing 1 HP, or draw a card. But there's also this little symbol ability down at the bottom of all of them. When they're on their teenager side, they can play Omega Morpher, put their coin onto the card, and then they can discard the coin to flip the card to the ranger side until the end of that turn, letting them take advantage of those abilities. So again, you're the Omega Red Ranger in this case. You're flipped to the ranger side. You play Omega Morpher. Now you've got your Omega coin sitting on the card. Now instead of discarding it to do something, you will place it on a card of some kind in play. In the case of the Omega Red Ranger, you place it on a card attached to a foe, so one of the villains that you're up against. Deal 2 damage to that foe each time that card exhausts. But it differs. Omega Yellow Ranger, you place it on an attack card attached to a ranger, and that card deals +2 damage. In the case of the Black Ranger, you place it on a Zord. You can ready that Zord immediately and activate it for no cost. So you get basically an extra activation of a Zord. Omega Blue Ranger, place it on a card in the grid. Foes can't buy or battle that card, and heroes pay 2 fewer shards to buy that card. Continuing on with other new cards, to replace the blasters from either the core game or Zeo, you now have the Omega Strike. Still costs 2, still gives you 2 shards, but the ability, at the end of your turn, you may destroy this card. If you do, heal 1, or target foe loses 2 HP and you lose 1 HP. The Omega Rangers, to some degree, are all about sacrifice. You then again have your typical Masters, so Master cards for each of the 4, and you have Zords. Now we have the red Omega Zord, the black Omega Zord, the yellow Omega Zord, and the blue Omega Zord. But there's something special with these. Zord, still cost of 7, still get that -2 if your teammate controls theirs already. In this case, an ability for 2 attack, deal 2 damage, blah, blah, blah. But every one of them then has a 3 energy cost ability to swap this Zord for the matching Fusion Zord. In the case of the Omega Rangers, they don't sort of transform and connect, they fuse together. For those purposes, each of the Rangers has their own Zord Fusion Mode card. So the idea would be that you've got a Zord out there in play. We'll slap it into the original game's Zord Bay from Bonus Box 1. Then we put a second one in play. Now let's assume that on this turn, a Ranger chooses to spend 3 energy to swap this Zord for the matching Fusion Zord. So you'll pull out the black Fusion Zord, and notice no cost. They look very, very different here. You don't actually put this out as a regular Zord anymore. So he's gone. But then this becomes essentially a card to attach to another Zord that is in play. And when it's fused, you're going to retrieve a Zord from outside the game, one that is not currently in the game at all, not just not in play, but not in the game at all, and place it on the bottom of the Zord stack, sort of replenishing your supply of Zords so that they all wind up going fusion mode. You still have Zords that you can fuse with. And essentially what that means is you put it underneath some other Zord as an attachment. And now that special ability is added to that Zord. There are specific rules as to the rare case where you might have a Zord get removed from the bay. That's covered in the rulebook. Generally speaking, the key is that outside of that rare circumstance, you actually can't ever unfuse the Zords. But the abilities vary. So for red, do whatever, then perform the ability a second time. It's like it's adding that text to it. Blah, blah, blah. Then draw 1 card, and this card does not exhaust, but can still only be activated once per turn. Blah, blah, blah. Then heal 1 and destroy up to 2 cards in your discard pile. Or blah, blah, blah. This attack cannot be negated. So obviously you'd want to use that with an attack. Then along with all those new mechanisms, you now have 2 copies each of 20 different new main deck cards. So a total of 40 new main deck cards. And the way that you would integrate all of this is that you're going to take all of these and you're just going to shuffle them all together. if whatever other set you're bringing into this, whether it's the original core set, Zeo, whatever, you're going to separate your cards out first by type, then you're going to separate them out by cost. And remember, in the core sets, it's 2 copies of each card, just like it is here. And what you're going to do is for, say, equipment, you're going to grab one of the 2 cost pairs, that is 2 copies of 1 card, one of the 3, one of the 4, one of the 5. Same thing with maneuvers, villains, and heroes. Shuffle them all together with all this that you shuffled together. And for locations, they are the only ones that are different. To go along with the 4 here, you're just going to grab any 2 other locations and shuffle them in as well. So you'll still result with 16 hero cards, 16 villain cards, 16 equipment cards, 16 maneuver cards, and 6 locations. And for each of those that have 16, it's actually 8 individual cards with 2 copies each. And you can, if you want to, if you're playing with Zeo, add in the Zeo crystals if you like. So cool, but a very different way of integrating than what we saw with the core set with Zeo. And there you have it, folks, the nuts and bolts of the very first expansion beyond the core boxes for the Power Rangers deck building game, Omega Forever. Great for comic fans, might go over the heads of those who aren't comic fans, but the mechanisms should be fun for anyone, as they do add really more to the game that's new than even Zeo did beyond the original core set. Next time we take a look at the second small expansion, RPM, Get in Gear!